Hunt for the Seal Stones. In Alinea, Grendel summoned Evan and Myrrh to the magic library. He told them that Chief Totemo had gotten back to him and confirmed that he had information on the Onyx Dragons. However, he explained what Totemo hardly talked about the Onyx Dragons, even to him, as though they were something about the topic that Totemo felt guilty about. When Evan asked if there was any way to convince Totemo to share what he knew, Grendel told him that Totemo might help if Evan were to give him an Onyx Dragon scale. Evan asked Myrrh for a scale, but Myrrh refused and told him that it would create a bald spot on his hide. After Evan persuaded him with shrimp and fish from Gold Beach, Myrrh reluctantly allowed Evan to pluck a scale. Evan brought the scale to Grendel, who told them that he would let them know what Totemo said. Meanwhile, Iran was contacted by True, who asked her to come see him at his shop. Though Iran noted that True's mannerisms were uncharacteristic of him, she arrived at his shop and found him tied and unconscious to a chair, with Francis and a second True waiting for her. Francis thanked the second True, who revealed himself to be a shape-shifted Baroque. After Baroque left, Francis told Iran that the reason she had beaten him last time was because he had just come back from a battle with the Cygnus Knights, promising that he would be much more strong, or a much stronger foe this time around. Bad at reading. Author's note. This is likely a reference to the Cygnus Knights storyline from before the Cygnus Awakens revamp, which took place around the same time as Iran and Evan's storylines. The current Cygnus Knights storyline makes allusions to the original version, namely that Francis had once tried to use his puppets to take over Victoria Islands and was stopped by the Cygnus Knights. We can assume that Francis is referring to one of the battles that the old Cygnus Knights storyline has you do. Despite his boasting, Iran was once again able to defeat him with ease, forcing Francis to retreat. She then freed True, who thanked her for saving him. He was surprised that Francis would have gone so far, but he was content with having learned the puppet master's weakness. Or weaknesses. Iran was confused by what he meant, and so True explained that Francis's drastic measures meant that the document which she had obtained from his cave was real, which confirmed that the Black Mage's goal, or the Black Wing's goal, was to recover the Seal Stone of Victoria Island. He then urged Iran to keep training while he investigated further. Soon after, Evan and Myrrh were contacted by Grendel, who told them that Totemo was very curious about how Evan had managed to obtain an Onyx Dragon scale and wanted to meet him. Grendel offered to teleport them to Leafrey, though he warned them not to roam outside the town, as the monsters in Leafrey were far stronger than they could handle. At the Halflinger village, Totemo was both amazed and relieved that an Onyx Dragon still lived, and a young one at that. When Evan asked how the Onyx Dragons had gone extinct, Totemo merely told him that a dark force had wiped them out centuries ago, though he claimed that he had no idea why. He offered to let Myrrh stay in Leafrey, where he would be cared for by the Halflingers, but Evan and Myrrh both refused and told him that they belonged at each other's side. Totemo laughed and said that he understood, adding that Myrrh's existence made him all the more determined to find another Onyx Dragon. After leaving Leafrey, Myrrh told Evan that he felt sad thinking that he was the last of his species. However, he reassured Evan that he still had hope that other Onyx Dragons still existed. Soon after returning to Victoria Islands, Evan and Myrrh were contacted by Sabitrama, a shaman from Sleepywood. Sabitrama had heard stories about Evan's heroic actions around Victoria Islands and wanted to request the young Dragon Master's help. He explained that someone had stolen his bag of herbs, which he used to make medicine, and suspected that the culprit was a thief from Kerning City. Evan went to Kerning City to investigate, where he ran into Alex, Chief Stan's runaway son. Alex asked Evan about the latest news from Hennesis, ever since he had run away in exchange for a tip to seek out JM from the streets, who knew everything in Kerning City. JM demanded a fee of Sturge Wings for information, after which he told Evan that it was unlikely that anyone from the city had taken the herbs. as potions were much more convenient in modern day. Because of this, JM suspected that the thief had taken the herbs in order to use them rather than sell them. He told them to speak with Nella, whose keen sense of smell might help them find the herbs. Evan explained the situation to Nella, who was offended by Sabitrama's belief that the thieves of Kerning City were criminals, explaining that the thieves of Kerning City merely adopted a particular aesthetic, and they had no interest in taking other people's livelihoods. She swore to Evan that the thief wasn't from Kerning City and resolved to find them herself in order to restore Kerning City's honor. Around this time, Phantom awoke from the ice and began to reacquaint himself with the centuries of history that he had missed by helping his intelligence network aboard the Lumiere collect information. He was then hired by True, who asked to help recover the Sealstone of Victoria Island. Although Phantom told True that the Sealstone was useless while the Black Mage was sealed, he nevertheless helped True obtain the Sealstone. Author's notes. These events are referenced in Phantom's storyline, but never directly shown. Phantom remains largely underground after helping True, only revealing himself publicly when Hilla attempts to overthrow Cygnus after the alliance is formed. Soon after, True learned that the cave in Linnea was empty, meaning that Francis had changed his headquarters. After investigating, he found that Francis was hiding in the Golem Temple and sent Aran to deal with him. After defeating Francis, Aran returned to True, who asked her why she seemed downcast. Aran told him that her mission had been a failure, as she had failed to learn anything about the Sealstone of Victoria Island in Francis's hideout. To her surprise, True revealed that he had already found it. As the Blackwings knew where his shop was, True felt that it was unwise to keep the Sealstone, and so he asked Aran to give it to Lilin for safekeeping, explaining that Rien was normally only populated by the native races of the island, and so many spells had been placed on it to keep it inaccessible to foreigners. He then told Aran that he would no longer assign her missions, as she had gained enough experience around the Maple world to gather information for herself. He told her to keep investigating the Blackwings and asked her to let him know immediately if she learned more about the Sealstone. Meanwhile, Nella contacted Evan and told him that she sent her men to gather information on the thief, and that one of them had found a clue in Sleepywood. However, he had been attacked by wraiths on the way back to Kerning City and had lost his report. Evan and Mur recovered the report in Kerning City's subway and brought it to Nella. She explained that the report was written in a secret code that only thieves used. After translating it, she learned that the thief had gone to a cave at the end of the forest of Alinea. Inside the cave, they found a lone puppet who explained that his master had been injured while fighting his enemies. Since the puppet had no money to buy potions, he had stolen the bag of herbs in order to heal his master. As his master's wounds hadn't fully healed, he begged them to bring him some potions in order to help his master. After bringing him the potions, the puppet thanked them and returned the bag of herbs. Evan returned them to Sabitrama and told him how Nella had aided him in recovering the herbs. Sabitrama felt ashamed for his prejudice against Kerning City and asked Evan to apologize to Nella on his behalf. After Evan passed on Sabitrama's message, Nella was pleased that Kerning City's honor had been restored. Soon after, the puppet contacted Evan and told him that he needed bandages to treat his master's wounds. Evan and Mur hunted Junior Race in the Kerning City subway and brought them to the puppet to use as bandages. The puppet was overjoyed and asked if they would be willing to join his master's secret organization. Though the puppet didn't know what the name of the organization was, he assured Evan that its members had performed good deeds throughout the Maple world. Evan believed that as a Dragon Master, he should join such an organization and accepted the puppet's offer. The puppet told Evan that he would speak with his master and try to pull some strings in order to recommend him. Soon after, the puppet contacted Evan and told him that his master had agreed to let Evan join, providing that he passed the entry test, which was to eliminate ligators in the swamp region, as they were disrupting his master's construction of a new base. Author's note: I don't think that Francis ever has a base on the swamp region. This might be a dropped plot point. After passing the test, Evan was told that there was yet another condition to join, which was to collect Croco skins. After Evan brought him the skins, the puppet told Evan to expect to hear from him soon. Sure enough, the puppet soon told Evan that he had been accepted as a temporary member of the organization, though he added that Evan might soon be promoted to an official member after some time. He told Evan and Mur to go to the 16th floor of Orbis Tower, where they would find the details of their first mission behind a secret brick. He told Evan that upon becoming an official member, he would be able to meet directly with other members and choose which missions he wanted to accept. The puppet then transported them to Orbis Tower, where Evan found a badge for the secret organization, as well as instructions to collect rapid growth accelerants from the muddy swamp monsters in Kerning City. Evan was also told to keep the instructions and the accelerants behind the secret brick. After completing the mission, Mur wondered what the accelerants would be used for, to which Evan suggested that they might be used to make crops grow faster. Soon after, True contacted Iran and told her that he had expanded his intelligence network outside of Victoria Islands, allowing him to learn that something had happened in Orbis, which probably involved the Blackwings. In Orbis, Iran spoke with a half-nymph named Lisa, who told her that she had been unable to sleep last night because of a thumping noise that kept all the fairies of Orbis awake. After investigating the source, Lisa had learned that there were giant Nepenthes growing in the neglected strolling path. As Nepenthes didn't grow so abnormally large, she asked Iran to investigate the source of what was causing such drastic growth. After defeating the giant Nepenthes, Iran found bottles of rapid growth accelerants. Author's note: Iran and Evan's storylines intersect periodically, mostly with Evan being tricked into helping the Blackwings and Iran clearing up the mess. She brought them to Lisa, who told her that Orbis had been slowly sinking from the sky year by year, explaining that the heavier the mass on Orbis, the faster they would sink. She asked Iran to consult with a seer named Speruna about whether Orbis was going to sink because of the giant Nepenthes. Though she normally hated strangers, Speruna sensed that Iran had a strange aura and allowed her to speak. Iran explained the situation with the great Nepenthes and asked whether they would cause Orbis to sink. Peering into the future, Speruna foresaw that Orbis would be safe, though she asked Iran where the giant Nepenthes had been growing. After learning that they had been growing in the neglected strolling path, Speruna wondered whether someone had been trying to get into the sealed garden. Iran began asking what the sealed garden was, but Speruna snapped at her and asked who she was and why she was asking such questions. Before Iran could respond, Speruna looked into her crystal ball and was shocked by what she saw. She told Iran that a great fate hung over her, which was to overcome a terrible cause that had persisted for countless centuries. Though she didn't know much about the sealed garden, Speruna told Iran that the Empress had ordered it off limits, as it was where the seal stone of Orbis was hidden. Author's note: originally, the dialogue said that the goddess had ordered it off limits. They likely changed this because of the confusion with the ambiguity of the term goddess. Speruna explained that the only way to get to the sealed garden was to make the Nepenthes in the neglected strolling path grow large enough to reach the vines growing down from the sealed garden, and asked Iran to stop the people trying to steal the seal stone. In the sealed garden, Iran encountered Dargoth, the giant of the Blackwings. Dargoth realized that Iran was the one who had defeated Francis, and laughed that he would take the seal stone and defeat Iran all at once. Iran was able to defeat Dargoth, but a gentleman took the seal stone and disappeared before Iran could stop him. Frustrated, Iran returned to True and told him what had happened in Orbis. Though True was disappointed that the Blackwings had stolen the seal stone of Orbis, he was intrigued to know that there were multiple seal stones. He told Iran to cheer up and let Lilin know what had happened, reminding her about the importance of keeping Lilin in the loop. Lilin agreed with True that the confirmation of the existence of multiple seal stones was a major discovery, and reminded Iran that their acquisition of the seal stone of Victoria Islands was an even bigger success. She told Iran to keep focusing on her training while she and True kept looking into locations of the seal stone. Meanwhile, Evan and Myrrh were contacted by the gentleman, who told them that he was the one who had given them their first mission. Evan asked if he was the owner of the puppet, but the gentleman told him that its owner was Francis, whom he outranked. He also congratulated Evan and told him that the rapid growth accelerant had been a big help to their organization, adding that even though Evan was not yet an official member, he had gone up in the ranks enough to be ready for his next mission. He told Evan to go to the Forest of the Dead in Elnath, where he was to defeat the decaying coolie zombies and take their decaying zombie molars, after which he was to take the molars and go to the chief's residence basement and exchange them with a goblin named Shamos. Though Evan and Myrrh had a bad feeling, they nevertheless completed their mission and gave the teeth to Shamos, who gave them a black key in return. The gentleman then told Evan to put the key inside a small stump on the outskirts of town, explaining that another member of the organization would come pick it up. Myrrh was excited about having completed yet another mission and asked Evan if he felt as though they had done something good for the people of the Maple World. Though he was confused about the purpose of the mission, Evan agreed that defeating the zombies must mean that they had done some good. Myrrh then wondered why the organization was so clandestine, as no one would know about their good deeds if the organization was so secret. Evan, Evan supposed that it wouldn't be humble of them to brag about their good deeds. Soon after, Myrrh experienced another metamorphosis and grew even larger as Evan's magical mastery increased. Sometime later, Aran was summoned to Rien by a penguin named Poochie, who explained that while taking care of his huskies, he had realized that one of them was actually a wolf. As wolves weren't native to Rien, he wondered where it might have come from. Though he didn't know much about wolves, he felt that it would be too cruel to abandon it, and so he had resolved to raise the wolf until it could take care of itself. In order to find out more about raising wolves, he asked Aran to go to a snowy whale island in Aqua Road in order to visit Nanuke, who was experienced in raising wolves. Nanuke told Aran that she had raised wolves before and offered to make a wolf pup formula in order to help it grow stronger. For the formula, she asked Aran to bring seahorse tails and wolf cub vitamins from Kenta in aquarium. Aran brought the ingredients to Nanuke, who made the formula for her. She took it to Rien and fed it to the wolf, who instantly grew attached to her. Uchi told her that he had named the wolf Werewolf, and that Aran would soon be able to ride it. Sometime later, Aran encountered Skadur in Elnath, who was impressed to see Werewolf, as he hadn't seen anyone with a wolf in ages. He told her that he could teach her to ride the wolf, and explained that she would need a wolf saddle. He offered to make her one in exchange for bringing Junior Yeti skins for the raw material. With the skins, Skadur made her the saddle and taught her how to ride Werewolf. Meanwhile, Grendel contacted Evan and asked how his research on Onyx dragons was going. He had heard a rumor about someone in Victoria Islands riding a dragon and wondered if Evan might be able to ride Myrrh. Myrrh told him that it was possible, but that Evan would need a saddle as well as lessons on how to ride a dragon. Evan asked Grendel where the dragon rider could be found and learned that they were in Parion. There they met the dragon rider Fangblade, who told them he could teach Evan how to ride a dragon if he were to find a mount. Author's note, this quest is really cool, as you can talk to the Fangblade NPC to get the mount skill. Outside GMS, I believe the NPC you speak to is called the Dragon Warrior. Fangblade suggested that they try checking Arev, as many of the people there rode birds. In Arev, Neinhardt demanded that Evan state his name, job, and purpose, as Arev was a restricted area. Evan was confused, as he had seen many people entering and leaving Arev. Neinhardt explained that they were Cygnus Knights, and ordered Evan to leave immediately. Evan persisted, asking how Arev made their mounts, but Neinhardt once again asked Evan for his name, job, and purpose. Evan introduced himself as a dragon master, which intrigued Nineheart enough that he resolved to look into what a Dragon Master was. He then told Evan that they outsourced production of saddles to Kenta in the aquarium. With that, Nineheart insisted that they leave at once. They then went to speak with Kenta, who was intrigued by Myrrh. After taking his measurements, Kenta asked for freezer leather and seraph pearls as a service fee. After providing the items, Kenta made a saddle for Myrrh. They returned to Perion, where Fangblade taught Evan how to ride Myrrh. Back in Lith Harbor, True reached out to Iran and told her that he had learned of Blackwing activity in Mulong. He told her to investigate Mr. Doe, who had been in contact with one of the Blackwings. Mr. Doe told Iran that the Blackwing member was known as the Shadow Knight, and that the Shadow Knight had given him a hanging scroll to pass on to Mugong, the master of the Mulong Dojo. However, Mr. Doe had accidentally boiled the scroll while making medicine, and the contents of the scroll had been lost. He asked Iran to visit Jinjin, the best painter in Mulong, in order to see if he could restore it. Jinjin had Iran gather materials to create a special ink, which he then used to restore the hanging scroll. Iran read the scroll and found out that it was a warning from the Shadow Knight that he was going to steal the seal stone of Mulong. She showed the scroll to Mr. Doe, who realized that the Shadow Knight had written it as a challenge to Mugong and asked Iran to warn him. Though one would have to normally fight to the top floor of the dojo in order to reach Mugong, Mr. Doe told her that Mugong's apprentice, Sogong, could be bribed into showing her the back route to Mugong. As Sogong was obsessed with becoming the strongest warrior, Mr. Doe told Iran that if she brought him bellflowers, which were said to be good for one's health, he might let her pass. Sure enough, when Iran brought the bellflowers, Sogong showed her the secret path to reach his master. At the top of the dojo, Iran gave the hanging scroll to Mugong, who grew worried that the Shadow Knight would steal the seal stone. He told Iran that the seal stone was a valuable item guarded by the warriors of Mulong for centuries. When Iran asked for more details on the seal stone, Mugong tested her to see if she was worthy of receiving the knowledge. Iran successfully fought Mugong's shadow, and Mugong immediately recognized her fighting style, which he said had not been used for centuries and was rumored to have been used by one of the heroes. Because of this, he mistook Iran to be a disciple of the heroes, but nevertheless told her the location of the seal stone, as well as the password to enter. Though he knew that the Shadow Knight's challenge had been meant for him, he felt that it would be better for the hero's successor to face him. Iran then entered the sealed temple, where the Shadow Knight was waiting. Just like Mugong, he mistook her for the hero's successor rather than one of the heroes herself. Iran was able to defeat the Shadow Knight, but just like in Orbis, the gentleman appeared from the shadows and took the seal stone of Mulong. Frustrated, Iran returned to Mugong to report her failure. To Iran's surprise, Mugong revealed that the heroes had entrusted the seal stone with the chief of Mulong, who had constructed the sacred or the sealed temple in order to safeguard it. He then told Iran that the loss of the seal stone may not have been significant, as he had believed that the reason the sealed temple was so heavily protected was because it was the legacy of the heroes, adding that he didn't know the purpose of the seal stone. Author's note: I love how despite the whole purpose of the seal stone was to be used for the people to protect their lands, not a single one of them knows what they are or how to use them. I suppose they don't need it since the Black Mage is sealed away, but what if he returned or a similar threat arose and the other heroes weren't around to explain how they worked? I would have thought that at least someone would have written down instructions on how they worked for future generations, but I guess not. Dejected, Iran returned to True and told him about the events in Mulong. True reassured Iran that she was growing stronger and that she would stop the Blackwings next time. He told her to speak with Lilin about what she had learned in Mulong. Lilin was excited to learn that the heroes had left behind the seal stone and said that the information made up for losing the seal stone. Iran was confused by how she had reached that conclusion. to which Lilin explained that by piecing together information on the heroes, she could predict which places were likely to have seal stones before the Blackwings found out about them. As always, she told Aron to focus on training while she researched the heroes and True looked into the Blackwings. Meanwhile, Grendel contacted Evan and told him that a new book had arrived in the magic library, which held a clue on the Onyx dragons. When Evan arrived, Grendel showed him the book and explained that it was a voyage log written by John from Lith Harbor, which detailed his encounters with a dragon that had black scales and 4 golden horns while he had been marooned on an island covered in ice. Evan and Mur went to Lith Harbor in order to speak with John, who gave them a map to the island and told them to ask Tio to ferry them. Tio told them that the route to the island was especially perilous and that he didn't have the skills to take them. However, he mentioned that Olaf, an experienced sailor, would be able to help them and suggested they buy him a drink in order to persuade him. Evan bought Olaf his favorite drink, a tropical fruit punch, and Olaf agreed to take them, although he said that due to the harsh conditions on the voyage, he would need a stronger ship. He asked Evan to bring wooden boards and slates from the monsters at the excavation site in Parion in order to fortify his ship, after which he told Evan that he would reach out once it was ready. As Olaf continued working on the ship, Lilin called Aron to Rien once again. She explained that Maha had been acting strangely and suggested that he wanted to speak with her. In Rien, Maha told Aron that a thief had stolen a red jade that decorated the polearm. He believed that the thief had disguised himself as a penguin in order to avoid detection, and that they were likely fleeing Rien as he spoke. Aron chased after the thief, which she discovered was the thief Crow, and managed to defeat it. However, she forgot to recover the red jade and returned back to town. Author's note: Frood and Afrian left behind only 2 brain cells, and they existed on a rotating basis between Luminous, Mercedes, and Shade. Phantom, Aron, Evan, and Mur proudly remained the token bimbos and himbos of their group. Oh my god, dude. As Maha succumbed to hysterics, Aron asked Lilin what to do, as the thief Crow had likely recovered from the battle and escaped with the jewel. Lilin believed that the red jade likely amplified Maha's power, and so they needed to quickly make a replacement. She suggested that Aron visit the Mirror of Desire once again in order to find out how to craft the jewel. Through the mirror, Aron saw one of her memories in which she encountered a Yeti named Tititi in Elnath. Tititi was crying, as a thief Crow had stolen his red jade. After Aron recovered the jewel, Tititi gave it to her as a reward. Through the mirror, the present-day Aron was able to extract the red jade from her memories and affixed it back on her polearm. Maha was overjoyed by the return of his jewel, and with his powers amplified once again, he was able to bestow more of Aron's old power upon her. Author's note: the Mirror of Desire is so broken if it lets you get real-life replicas of objects from your memories. Her taking the red jade by looking in the mirror is just like how Harry got the Philosopher's Stone from the Mirror of Erised, which is probably where the Mirror of Desire gets its inspiration from, given that Desire is just Erised backwards. Back in Lith Harbor, Olaf let Evan know that he had finished fortifying his ship. Evan and Mur climbed aboard, and after a long voyage, they finally arrived on the island. Author's note: I'm not joking when I say it was a long voyage. I think that it's the only voyage left in the game that hasn't been reduced by revamps to less than a minute. Each trip, one way, takes 15 minutes, meaning that the round trip is half an hour, making Evan's storyline one of the most tedious to finish. Mur was amazed at how quiet the island was, as the only noise came from the gently crashing waves. Directly in front of them was a large cave, inside which they found a large magical ice wall that separated them from what appeared to be a large onyx dragon. As they didn't want to accidentally hurt the dragon, Evan decided to leave the ice wall alone and resolved to return after thinking of another way to get inside. Meanwhile, True contacted Iran and told her that a crack in time had appeared in the time control room in Ludibrium, which was rumored to lead centuries into the past when the heroes were still alive. Author's note: this is a continuity error created by the revamped Ellen Forrest storyline, in which the time control room is implied to be broken down shortly before Wiz calls to tell you about it. The only way to potentially resolve this is to have a gap between the room breaking down and Wiz calling us to Ellen Forrest, during which time Iran and Luminous can have their quests that take place in Ellen Forrest. Author's note, or sorry. Iran entered through the crack in time and arrived in Ellen Forest. Proceeding deeper into the forest, she arrived at Altair camp and met Euryce, who assumed that she was a lost refugee and sent her to Athena Pierce. At the camp conference room, Iran met with Athena and began to explain who she was, but Athena remained unconvinced of her identity, as Iran looked different and she was unable to remember Athena. Iran began explaining everything that had happened to her since she had awakened from the ice, and though Athena found it unbelievable, she could not deny that Iran's eyes and her manner of speaking suggested that she was telling the truth. Choosing to believe her, Athena introduced herself and told Iran about how the refugees of Leafree had crash-landed on Victoria Islands and established Altair camp, while searching for fertile lands in order to relocate to. She then asked Iran why she looked different, causing them both to realize that coming through the crack in time had likely changed her appearance. Author's note: this whole conversation with Athena is a change from the original questline, as the time travel mechanics established in the revamped Ellen Forrest storyline explained that people who come from the past look different in order to prevent strange paradoxes from happening. Since Iran didn't look different in the original questline, Athena and Euryce both recognized her immediately. Athena then asked Iran whether she had come in search of her lost memories, but when Iran explained that she was looking for seal stones, Athena told her that she had been given a seal stone by the heroes, which she was keeping locked in the library. After obtaining the storage keys from Loha, Iran entered the library and encountered the gentleman who had also entered the crack in time. Before she could stop him, the gentleman disappeared with the seal stone of Ellen Forrest. Athena apologized to Iran for not having better secured the seal stone, but Iran reassured her that it wasn't her fault. Athena then told her that she had also been given a letter by Iran in the past, which she recalled had mentioned something about the seal stones. However, when Iran tried to take the letter, it merely fell through her hands, which Athena found weird, as Iran had been able to take the storage key from Loha without any problems. Author's note: the original explanation for being unable to take the letter was that you couldn't interact with objects from the past. This explanation was removed after the Ellen Forrest storyline was revamped, and we're left with an open-ended question with no answer. My personal theory is that time travel mechanics prevent objects from being moved if it would break the flow of time. For instance, this letter is meant to be given to the next Empress, and so it wouldn't do for it to be taken outside the normal flow of time. On the other hand, the storage key stays in its proper time, and so it can be handled by a time traveler without issue. The Seal Stone grants the power to defy destiny, and so my theory is that they exist outside the natural laws of time, which is how Hiver was able to take it. Since she was an elf, and thus had a long lifespan, Athena suggested that she could keep the letter and instructed Iran to find her in present day. After returning to her own time, Iran told True what had happened in Ellen Forest and asked him who Athena Pierce was. She was surprised to learn that Athena was one of the most famous people in the Maple world, both as an instructor for bowmen and as an influential leader in Victoria Islands. Iran went to the bowman instructional school, where she found that Baroque, the master of disguise, had knocked out Athena and was reading the letter. After Iran defeated him and saved Athena, she took the letter to True, who found it was completely unreadable. They realized that it was written in code, and that since Baroque had already read it, the Blackwings likely already knew the contents of the letter. True told Iran that Lilin would be able to decipher it, and so Iran went to Rien and showed the letter to her. Lillian realized that the code was extremely complicated, with several layers of encryption. She asked Aran for some time to decipher it, and told her to focus on training in the meantime. Meanwhile, Evan was contacted by the gentleman who began to explain his third mission. Evan interrupted him and asked to learn more about the organization, as he knew nothing about it, despite being a member. The gentleman told Evan to come to the Frog House in Ludibrium, where he introduced himself as Hiver, a top leader of the Blackwings. He explained that the Blackwings did many things to help the Maple World, but their primary goal was to bring back the Great Black Mage. Though he couldn't elaborate too much, he told Evan that the Blackwings had been created to revive the Black Mage, and that his return would be the greatest thing that could happen to the Maple World. With that, he gave Evan his third mission, which was to capture the ghosts of Secret Master Soul Teddies. While collecting them, Mur asked Evan if he had felt that something was off, as rumors stated that the Blackwings were the same organization hated by the people of Edelstein. Mur felt that he wasn't sure whether they were on the right side or not. After returning to Hiver, Evan began to voice his concerns, but Hiver quickly dismissed him and said that he needed to focus on preparing the ghosts that Evan had collected. Soon after, Lillian told Aran that she had successfully deciphered the letter, which she learned had been written by the heroes and given to Athena Pierce in order to pass on to the new Empress of Maple World. Author's note: this quest originally referred to the Empress as the Queen, which actually makes more sense as queens rule kingdoms. While an empress rules an empire. The Empress has also been referred to as the Priestess of Arev in the Critias storyline and the Castellian in the Demon storyline. This quest raises the question of why Athena Pierce didn't tell Aran that the letter was for the Empress in the first place. Since Athena mentioned that Aran of the past was the one who had given her the letter, there's no way that she didn't know who it was meant for. She told Aran that the letter simply said to take care of the seal stone of Arev. As the Blackwings had read the letter, they likely knew of the seal stone's existence, and so Lillian asked Aran to warn the people of Arev and told her to bring the letter as proof. Aran went to Arev and met with Nineheart, who was surprised that Aran knew about the seal stone of Arev, also known as Shinsu's teardrop. Nevertheless, he told Aran to leave, as not only was Arev was closed to foreigners, but he also didn't trust that Aran wasn't one of the Blackwings herself. Author's note: there's no way that Nineheart didn't recognize Aran. He's probably seen her frozen in ice multiple times while living in Rien. My headcanon, while it doesn't fit with the lore, is that he behaved so coldly with Aran because he feels guilty for having lost faith in the prophecy, and so he refuses to acknowledge her as one of the heroes out of stubbornness, since he doesn't want to admit to himself that he was wrong. Meanwhile, Hiver contacted Evan and told him that his preparations were complete. He gave Evan and Mur a pouch containing the spirits that they had captured and told them to use a special portal that he had created, which would take them to Sky Terrace. There, Evan was to climb a ladder and release the Master Soul Teddy's spirits in order to chase everyone away. Evan and Mur followed his instructions and released the spirits, causing the guard who was patrolling the area to run away in fear. Evan was confused about why he had been told to do this, and after returning back to Frog House, he attempted to question Hiver. However, Hiver interrupted him once again and promised to answer his questions after the mission was complete. He told Evan that thanks to his actions, a member of the Blackwings had been able to break through the first layer of security at the Sky Terrace. He then asked Evan to go further inside and defeat a monster called the Door Block. Evan and Mur returned to Sky Terrace and encountered the Door Block, who called them thieves and denounced their audacity to try and steal the seal stone of Ludibrium. After defeating the Door Block, they returned to Hiver, who thanked them for their work and told them to get some rest, promising to contact them with their next mission soon. He then disappeared without having answered any of Evan's questions. Evan and Mur agreed that there was something strange about the Blackwings, as things weren't adding up about the missions that they had been completing. Soon after, Hiver contacted them with their fourth mission, which was to obtain a map from Captain Huang in Herbtown, or Herbtown. He told them to ask the captain for a map of Turtle Island, as he would know what that meant. In Herbtown, Captain Huang agreed to give them the map in exchange for defeating the pirates who had been harassing the people of Herbtown. After Evan and Mur eliminated the pirates, the captain gave him the map, but warned them that the journey to the island was perilous and recommended that they didn't go. Evan then contacted Hiver to report his success. Hiver was impressed and teleported them to Frog House, where he told them that he had a fifth mission ready. With the map, Hiver modified the special portal that had taken them to Sky Terrace and explained that they could use the portal to get to Turtle Island. He then gave Evan a gruesome bone that reeked of dark energy and told him to place it on an altar inside the cave that they would find. After which they were to leave immediately, no matter what else they found. He explained that an evil being had placed a spell on the island that prevented the Blackwings from entering, which was why he needed Evan's help. Evan reluctantly agreed and took the portal to Turtle Island. Upon arriving, he and Mur immediately realized that Turtle Island was the same island that they had sailed to with Olaf. They entered the cave and placed the bone upon the altar, causing its dark energies to melt the ice wall between them and the Onyx Dragon. Hiver was pleased and told them to head outside where a boat was waiting for them. Evan attempted to tell Hiver about the Onyx Dragon, but Hiver told him to ignore it and escape before the dragon awoke. As they left the cave, Mur became increasingly frantic and told Evan that something was terribly wrong about the whole situation. Evan agreed with Mur, and they decided to return to the cave, where they found Hiver and several Blackwing henchmen attempting to kill the dragon. Evan and Mur quickly defeated the henchmen and knocked back Hiver, who was impressed by their strength. He decided to retreat, but warned that they would be enemies once their paths crossed again. The sleeping dragon then awoke and telepathically spoke to Evan, introducing himself as Afrian, the king of Onyx Dragons. Evan asked him why the Onyx Dragons had gone extinct and why Afrian was trapped inside the ice cave. Afrian told Evan the story of how he and Frood had formed the Spirit Pact, and when the Black Mage had destroyed the Onyx Dragons, and how the Black Mage had destroyed the Onyx Dragons. To elaborate, he showed Evan a memory of himself speaking with Frood shortly before they had stormed the Temple of Time. Evan witnessed how Afrian had asked Frood to take care of his egg if he were to fall in battle, and how in turn Frood had Afrian promise that he would do anything in his power to survive, as well as promise not to sacrifice himself on Frood's behalf. Evan then realized that Mur was Afrian's child, though Afrian asked Evan not to tell Mur, explaining that he was as good as dead, and that the knowledge would only bring Mur pain. He told Evan that when the Black Mage had cast his curse on the heroes, he had taken the curse in Frood's place. He explained that the ice around his body had nearly melted, but that his body had become one with the island. Because of this, the animals who lived there would also die if he were to move. Frood had cast a spell on the island to prevent anyone affiliated with the Black Mage from entering, and made it so that only a Dragon Master could awaken Afrian. Evan asked how Hiver knew all of this, to which Afrian said that it wasn't important. Author's note, I think that's kind of important. He then added that the important thing was that Hiver had used Evan. He explained that since Hiver couldn't enter the island himself, he had manipulated Evan into breaking the spell and awakening Afrian. He then told Evan that his only wish was that Evan and Mur stop the Blackwings. As Mur hadn't seen Afrian's memories, he asked Evan to tell him what he had learned. Evan kept his promise not to tell Mur about his ancestry, and instead explained that the Black Mage, far from being the force of good that Hiver had promised, was the one responsible for wiping out the Onyx Dragons. Realizing that they had been manipulated, Evan and Mur decided to visit each of the places they had completed missions in order to see what consequences their actions had wrought. In Orbis, they learned from Lisa that the rapid growth accelerant had caused much harm due to the giant Nepenthes it created, and that only the actions of a passing traveler had resolved the situation. Next, they went to the chief's residence in Elnath, where they spoke with the magician instructor, Roberia, Evan asked her if they had done great work by hunting the zombies, to which she responded that they had indeed. She told them that if it hadn't been for the zombies, Elnath could have developed further, and that they would have resources to find a way to get rid of them. However, she warned them to take care of any zombie's teeth that they recovered, as the teeth contained a dark, corruptive energy. She told them that the corruption had taken hold of Shamos, who continued to perform misdeeds in spite of wanting to atone for his wrongdoings. When Evan asked what Shamos had done wrong, Roberia explained that Shamos had been caught with a copy of the key to the basement of the chief's residence. Although she had taken it away, she believed that he had likely made more copies, and explained that there was an old treasure stored in the basement, which needed to be protected at all costs. Author's note: this is likely an allusion to the Sealstone of Elnath, although this contradicts Phantom's storyline, which reveals that the Sealstone is located in the research lab in Alcast. Wait, what? The research lab of Alcaster's masters in Orbis Tower. In Ludibrium, they spoke with a guard named Marcel, who told them that the door block had guarded an important treasure, although no one knew what the treasure was. Its theft had been a major incident in Ludibrium. After realizing just how badly their actions had inflicted misfortune on the people of the Maple World, Evan and Myrrh were furious and decided to confront Hiver at Frog House in order to get revenge. There, Hiver told them that while they had been useful for a time, they had become nothing more than a hindrance. Evan and Myrrh unleashed their full power, which overwhelmed Hiver enough that he retreated. Knowing that he had probably returned to the Blackwing's base in Edelstein, Evan and Myrrh decided to follow him there. Meanwhile, the Blackwings conducted an operation to try and steal the Seal Stone of Arev. Baroque used his powers to disguise himself and infiltrate the island, but thanks to Iran's timely warning, Nineheart was prepared and mobilized the Cygnus Knights, who forced Baroque to retreat. Soon after, Nineheart asked Iran to come to Arev. There, he personally thanked her for her actions and explained that he had initially mistrusted Iran because of her strange aura, but after thoroughly investigating her, he now understood her dynamic past.